This story from the New York Times, actually from just about a couple weeks ago. Challengers of affirmative action have a new target, the New York City's elite high schools. The controversy surrounding Mayor Bill de Blasio's plan to integrate the city's specialized high schools just intensified. So essentially, Asians are now, my understanding is that Asians are now suing, but before I read into this, I want to just give an honorable mention to Harvard. For those that aren't familiar with the story, this is important context. Affirmative action, it's complicated, it's essentially understood to be a program that is encouraging minorities and marginalized groups to get access to certain jobs or into universities. Harvard makes it harder for Asians to get in. They have to score something like an Asian female would have to score a 1380 on their SATs. An Asian male would have to score a 1390. But Latinos and young black men, black youth and Latino youth only have to score something like 1100 below what a white person. They use white people as a baseline for whatever reason, maybe because white people are the majority. Well, Asians are suing, saying that's discriminatory. Not only that, though, Harvard, in their admissions process, they rate Asians typically as less likable, unlikable, or not courageous, and in my opinion, is racist. For one reason. Look, I understand Harvard has something like 20% of the student body is already Asian. That's a huge disproportion from the actual population in the US. But are you going to tell an Asian kid that because he looks like those other guys, he can't come to school here? That makes no sense. Okay, so it's got to be, in my opinion, class-based. Because if it is class-based, then if you're doing affirmative action programs based on class and not race, well, that makes more sense. You can be Asian and poor, you can be Asian and rich. How does it make sense that Asian is a deciding factor? It doesn't. So let's read this story and see what's going on in New York with the latest bout against affirmative action. And a side note, with Ruth Bader Ginsburg's health is in question, okay? And my heart goes out to her condolences. I wish her a long life and all that. I have much respect for people who are willing to serve as long as they did, and I don't care about politics. But we got to keep in mind that the Supreme Court is already leaning conservative, and this is changing. Affirmative action might actually go out the window, especially with these lawsuits. If these suits reach the Supreme Court, it's very likely that affirmative action goes bye-bye. So they start by saying, Bill de Blasio's plan to enroll more black and Hispanic students into New York City's most sought-after high school faces a brand new obstacle. This week, a couple weeks ago, the Pacific Legal Foundation, a conservative, libertarian-leaning law firm that has a history of challenging affirmative action policies, filed the first lawsuit against his admissions reform proposal, which he announced this summer. But the suit does not take on the part of Mr. de Blasio's proposal that has provoked the most controversy, a plan that would entirely eliminate the exam that is currently the sole means of admission into the city's elite specialized high schools. The mayor wants to replace the test with a system that guarantees seats to top performers at each of the city's middle schools, which would guarantee that the schools accept many more black and Hispanic students. Instead, Pacific Legal is taking aim at the first and more modest phase of Mr. de Blasio's proposal, the expansion of a program known as Discovery. There is a key difference between the two phases. The city has power to change Discovery by itself, but scrapping the test would require a change to the state law in Albany. So, what is Discovery? Currently, specialized schools enroll tiny percentages of black and Hispanic students, even though those students make up about 70% of the school system. This past year, only 10 black students were offered seats at Stuyvesant High School, the most competitive of the 8 test-in specialized schools. Discovery allows mostly low-income students who just missed the cutoff for entry to enroll in summer classes aimed at preparing them for the school's academic rigor. I'll stop right here and just mention, if you're doing low income straight up, that's perfect. And I think a lot of people on the left I don't know what the statistics are, but I believe you're going to get more. You're more likely to get minorities in the low income bracket. So it's like a win-win for everybody. When they start doing it by race, it just makes no sense. The current version of Discovery sets aside 6% of seats at specialized high schools for students who come from low-income families. Mr. de Blasio's plan would expand that to 20% of seats at each specialized school and require schools to reserve seats for more vulnerable students who not only come from low-income families, but also attend high-poverty schools. I gotta say, I got no problem with that. I don't know. This is a good opportunity for me to say, you guys comment, let me know what you think. But if we're doing this all based on class, that, in my opinion, is a good thing. Because what I've said before is that, you're only as strong as your weakest link, your society, your country. And if we've got impoverished areas that are kind of falling by the wayside, we should invest in them and make sure we can help repair those cracks in society. Because look, poverty breeds crime and all these other problems. Low income sounds fantastic. In a twist, some of the fiercest critics of Mr. de Blasio's plan to scrap the admissions test are also the strongest backers of the push to expand Discovery. That's interesting. The school's powerful alumni group have long been seen as a key obstacle to dramatic admissions reform. But as political pressure has grown around the issue in the last few months, those groups have faced fresh questions about how to integrate the schools. Discovery, which relies on the existence of the test to function, is their solution. Sue H. Kim, the president of Stuyvesant High School's alumni organization, said, "Done the right way, Discovery is the answer, full stop." I mean, if they're talking about income-based, then I'd agree, Why file suit? Mr. de Blasio's plan calls for a sharp increase in the number of students filling seats through Discovery this year, but Joshua Thompson, the lead attorney on Pacific's legal lawsuit, said he wants to maintain the status quo. The complaint filed in federal district court in Manhattan has two parts: a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of Discovery and a motion for preliminary injunction. Pacific Legal is asserting that because Discovery could prevent some Asian American students from gaining access to the schools, the program's expansion violates students' constitutional right to equal protection under the law. The expansion has both a discriminatory purpose and effect, a Pacific Legal News release reads. Mr. Thompson hopes the injunction will essentially block Discovery from expanding before applicants receive their admissions offerings this spring. If the court grants an injunction, the specialized schools would look like they did last year, Mr. Thompson said in a review. I'm concerned about the bias of the New York Times when reporting on the story, because if their argument is that by setting aside seats for low-income people, it can potentially discriminate against people based on race, I would say that's absolutely incorrect. You set aside some seats for low-income people, and I don't see that as discrimination. I mean, look, if you want to say it's discrimination against people based on their income, sure, but if the deciding factor has nothing to do with race, honestly, I'm okay with it. Now, obviously, scale is an issue. If they're going to make like a massive portion of this only for low-income people, it does become a problem, whereas it's tough to be fair. It really is. Is it fair to say to an Asian kid who busted his ass and, happens to come from a wealthy family that he can't go to the school because his seat went to a poor person based on a score? It isn't. At the same time, I think we have to recognize that resources are finite, period. And that in a fair society, in my opinion, we have a mixed economy, which means majority of the seats should go to those who've earned it, but we should allocate sums to lower income people to encourage strengthening the weakest links in our community, those who are less educated, who have lower incomes. We want everyone to become better off. You go too far to the socialism side, you make problems. Things start falling apart. You go straight laissez-faire capitalism, and then you start getting this wealth disparity, which results in peasant revolts, and that's bad for everybody. But you find that happy medium, and that's why social liberal. I like the mixed economy. I don't like straight up full free market capitalism, because I think you end up with, the biggest problem in my opinion with full free market capitalism is that all of your industry goes towards some things that are just not relevant to a stronger society and won't necessarily protect you from external threats. So there's got to be some government. Government can play a role in school and energy and things like that, social liberal policies, and mixed economy sounds pretty good, right? I mean, to me it does. Maybe you disagree. But you can comment. Tell me if you disagree. The broader suit, Mr. Thompson said, could take months or years to resolve. The city is standing behind its plan to expand Discovery, which would double the number of seats at specialized schools offered to Black and Hispanic students from about 9% to 16%. Our reforms will expand opportunity and raise the bar at our specialized high schools. Here's what I'm talking about with New York Times bias. You see what they say? They just changed it. They just flipped the narrative on me. They said before low income. Now they're saying specifically based on race. What are you trying to imply? Are they implying that Black and Hispanic people are going to get more access because they're poor? Or are they saying the program is specifically about race? Because if that's the case, it's a bad program that doesn't actually help anyone and makes no sense. And that's why, the New York Times, come on, man. You're the paper of record, aren't you? So they say that Pacific Legal's lawsuit compounds a growing legal threat to affirmative action policies at selective school. This fall, representatives for Harvard University defended the school's admissions policies in a high-profile suit revolving around a similar question. Do elite schools use policies to enroll more Black and Hispanic students at the expense of Asian American applicants? Which would be wrong, especially when you consider that Asian Americans are a lower percentage of the population, and you can't fault them based on their race. Natasha Wariku, a professor of education at Harvard who studies affirmative action, sees some parallels between the two lawsuits. There's this narrative of Asian Americans being targeted in the quest to bring more opportunity to Black and Latino people, she said. I think that narrative is incredibly problematic. All right. Well, let's just read their conclusion, and then I'll make some final points about all this. They say the plan faces increasingly steep odds in Albany this week. Newly elected State Senator John C. Liu of Queens, who has been outspoken against de Blasio's plan, was named the chairman of the Senate's New York City Education Committee. Michael Mulgrew, president of the United Federation of Teachers, which is a key player in Albany politics, has cast doubt on the plan's chances at the Capitol. And few, if any, politicians at the city or state level have been eager to take on the issue. A legislative session will begin in January. And this story's a couple weeks old. I didn't, cover it initially, but the main point I want to take away from this is, one, you've heard me say time and time again, racism doesn't stop racism. You make more racism. If they're going to start being racist towards Asians because Asians have a certain cultural, there's a thing within Asian culture of being studious or something. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying if that's what they're alleging, well, you're just being racist then. How I don't understand how you can be like, hey, we want to diversify the school by actually reducing the amount of a minority. Like, it doesn't make sense. So main point, if these suits go to the Supreme Court, at this point, affirmative action might be out the window. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. I think that's it for the day, maybe more, but I've got tons of videos. You probably haven't seen them all. Check out my channel. I'm now doing 4 videos per day, so thanks for hanging out. I'll see you all next time.